Hey, how can I help you?
Good, how you doing? I have a clock lighter that I found at my grandfather's house.
Every lighter should have a clock on it. You can really burn some time with that.
Only a handful of reality TV shows have managed to capture the world's attention for more than a decade, and Pawn Stars is one of them. Since 2009, the show has turned vintage collectibles, tough negotiations, and quirky personalities into must-watch television.
Looking $2,000.
$2,000's not gonna happen. It's more like $1,000.
And at the heart of it all is Rick Harrison, the sharp-witted, no-nonsense co-founder of the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop. But while fans saw a man in control, cracking jokes, and making million-dollar deals, the truth behind the scenes was far more complicated. Rick Harrison's life has been shaped by hardship, and we're not just talking about business. From childhood illness and tragic family losses to multiple divorces, lawsuits, and the devastating death of his son. Rick's journey has been quietly marked by more pain than most people will ever realize. And in recent years, that pain has spilled into public view, including a shocking legal battle with his own mother and questions about whether the pawn empire he built is now at risk. So what really happened to Rick Harrison, and how did the face of Pawn Stars go from reality TV legend to a man fighting to hold on to everything he's built? This is the untold story. Before he was the face of one of television's most successful reality shows, Rick Harrison was just a sick kid stuck in bed, dreaming of something bigger. Born on March 22, 1965 in Lexington, North Carolina, Richard Kevin Harrison came into a home filled with both love and hardship. His father, Richard Benjamin Harrison, later known to millions as the Old Man, was a disciplined Navy veteran with a sharp mind and a no-nonsense demeanor.
I'll see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning.
But we got cake for you.
Screw the cake.
His mother, Joanne Rue, held the family together through relocations and financial strain. Together, they had 4 children, but not all of them would make it to adulthood. Rick's oldest sibling, a sister named Sherry, was born with Down syndrome and tragically died at just 6 years old. Her death cast a long shadow over the family, and it was something Rick would never forget. He was still a toddler when she passed, but that early encounter with grief left a mark that never fully healed. Then, at just 8 years old, Rick began suffering from debilitating epileptic seizures. The episodes were severe, unpredictable, and terrifying. His childhood quickly became defined by long, lonely hours spent indoors, isolated from other kids. While most boys his age were outside riding bikes or playing sports, Rick was confined to his room and his imagination. But instead of falling into despair, Rick found an escape in books. He became obsessed with reading, especially one series in particular, The Great Brain, a collection of stories about a clever boy in 19th century Utah who constantly outwitted the adults around him. For young Rick, it wasn't just a story. It was a kind of survival guide. He became fascinated with the idea of negotiation, strategy, and outsmarting the system, themes that would follow him into adulthood. And as strange as it sounds, those long hours in bed, consumed by stories about con men and clever deals, may have planted the first seeds of what would one day become the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop. But Rick's challenges were far from over. His seizures didn't go away, and school became nearly impossible. Eventually, he made a decision that would change the course of his life forever. By the time most teenagers were worrying about prom or passing algebra, Rick Harrison was already waist-deep in adult responsibility. School had become a losing battle. The seizures, the boredom, and his growing obsession with the real world outside the classroom left him restless. So during 10th grade, Rick made a bold and risky decision. He dropped out. At just 16 years old, Rick turned to street hustle. He started selling fake Gucci bags out of the trunk of his car, earning around $2,000 a week. Not bad for a high school dropout. But the fast cash came with pressure. Las Vegas, where his family had moved in 1981 after their real estate business collapsed, wasn't exactly a forgiving place for a teenage hustler. Then came the next life-altering shock. Rick's girlfriend, Kim, got pregnant. He was just 17. Tragically, the young couple lost their first child to miscarriage, but instead of falling apart, they stayed together. In 1982, they married, and less than a year later, welcomed their first son, Corey, into the world. Today, Corey Harrison is one of the most recognizable faces on Pawn Stars, But back then, he was just another baby born into a family scraping by.
Do you really believe we're actually related to that guy?
Grandpa says we were.
I've met your grandfather, and he was a liar.
2 years later, Rick and Kim had their second son, Adam. But while the family was growing, the relationship was not. By 1985, the young couple separated, and Rick, not even 21, was left with 2 sons and a broken marriage. But Rick didn't waste time. Within 9 months, he started dating a woman named Tracy. The connection was fast, and within a year, they were married. Tracy stepped in to help raise Corey and Adam, and for a while it seemed like Rick might finally have some stability. Still, there was no fame, no fortune, no TV cameras, just a struggling young father, hustling to make ends meet and chasing a dream that didn't even have a name yet. In the early 1980s, Las Vegas was known for casinos, quick marriages, and desert heat, not for pawn shops. But Rick Harrison saw something others didn't. After the collapse of the family's real estate business, Rick and his father scraped together what they had left and opened a tiny 300-square-foot second-hand store called the Gold and Silver Coin Shop. It sat on Las Vegas Boulevard, far from the glitz of the Strip, and their early inventory was a strange mix: coins, collectibles, maybe a few dusty watches. During the day, Rick studied antiques and historical items. At night, he repossessed cars just to pay the bills. But behind the counter, a plan was taking shape. Rick and his father weren't just trying to survive. They were plotting something bigger. They wanted to turn the store into a full-blown pawn shop. The only problem? They couldn't. A decades-old Las Vegas law dating back to 1955 limited the number of pawn licenses in the city. Licenses were only granted based on population, and the city hadn't grown enough to allow any new ones. So Rick waited and watched. Every time the city got closer to the magic number, 250,000 residents, Rick was ready. He knew that once the population crossed that threshold, a new license could be issued. He just had to be first in line. In 1989, after years of legal wrangling and tireless preparation, Rick and his father finally got their wish. The city's population reached the target, and they were granted a pawn license. Just like that, their tiny coin shop transformed into the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop, and a new chapter began. At first, it was all about rare coins, vintage sports memorabilia, and quirky antiques. Rick's love for history became the shop's secret weapon. When a customer brought in a Civil War rifle or a World War II uniform, Rick didn't just price it, he told its story. That knowledge gave them an edge, and soon word of the history guys on Las Vegas Boulevard began to spread.
He's one of those people in history that really did abuse his power. He had files on every president, every politician, every judge. J. Edgar Hoover basically built the FBI from the ground up. And he took down some of the biggest criminals in history. But he kept secret files on everyone from JFK to Martin Luther King. It made him extremely powerful.
By the mid-2000s, the business was booming. They were lending out millions per year and earning hundreds of thousands in interest income. Gamblers pawned items to buy gas home. Tourists wandered in looking for weird souvenirs. And tucked inside that now busy storefront was a family slowly turning their corner store into an empire. By 2008, the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop was already a local legend in Las Vegas, but no one could have predicted what was about to happen. That year, 2 TV producers from Left Field Pictures, Brent Montgomery and Colby Gaines, came to town. They weren't looking for bright lights or high-stakes poker games. They were looking for something raw, something real. And they found it, 2 miles off the Strip, in a scruffy pawn shop run by a no-nonsense guy named Rick, his laid-back son Corey, and their oddball friend Austin Chumley Russell. Rick had been dreaming of a TV show for years. He even appeared in a 2003 episode of Insomniac with Dave Attell, and the shop had been featured in a PBS documentary. But until that day, no network had taken the bait. At first, the idea was pitched to HBO under the name Pawning History, but the tone was too gritty, too adult. The concept was reworked, polished, and pitched to the History Channel, and this time, it stuck. The title was changed to Pawn Stars, a cheeky play on words just scandalous enough to grab attention. And in July 2009, the show made its debut. The formula was simple: everyday people bringing in strange, rare, or priceless items, and Rick deciding what they were worth. But it was the characters that kept people watching.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good, how are you?
What do we got here?
This is an old music box.
You got the little monkey to wind it up?
Yeah, I brought him.
Rick's dry wit, Corey's quiet confidence, Chumley's comic relief, and of course the old man, Rick's gruff but lovable father, who quickly became a fan favorite.
You want to pawn this? You want to sell it?
I would like to sell it.
So how much you trying to get out of it?
Almost overnight, Pawn Stars became a cultural phenomenon. By January 2011, it was the History Channel's top-rated show. It even beat out major network competition and became the second highest-rated reality series in the U.S., just behind Jersey Shore. Rick wasn't just a pawn shop owner anymore. He was a celebrity. Fans lined up outside the shop. Tourists came by the thousands. And with cameras rolling, the once quiet gold and silver pawn shop became one of the most famous storefronts in the world. In 2011, Rick published his memoir, Licensed to Pawn, Deals, Steals, and My Life at the Gold and Silver, which climbed to number 22 on the New York Times bestseller list. He, Corey, and Chumley even made cameo appearances on iCarly and other sitcoms, blurring the lines between reality TV and pop culture.
Hey, what? Want to drink some of the First Lady's DNA?
Yeah.
But behind the booming business and smiling photo ops, Rick's personal life was already beginning to crack, and the pressure of fame was about to expose fault lines no one saw coming. While Pawn Stars was becoming a global phenomenon, Rick Harrison's personal life was quietly falling apart. In 2011, at the height of the show's fame, Rick divorced his second wife, Tracy, the woman who had helped raise his two sons and stood by his side through years of struggle. The split was quiet, but it marked a turning point. For a man who built his career on trust and negotiation, his own relationships were slipping through his fingers. But Rick wasn't alone for long. Just a year later, he proposed to Deanna Burdett, a legal assistant and mother of 3 daughters from a previous marriage. They tied the knot in a beachside ceremony in Laguna Beach in 2013, and, to the outside world, it looked like Rick had found peace. He took Deanna's daughters under his wing and proudly called them his own. "I got 3 great daughters out of it," he would later say, a statement that sounded heartfelt, but in hindsight, maybe a little bittersweet. As Rick's public profile grew, so did his brand. He became the face of micro-touch razors.
For almost 100 years, the single blade was the best way to shave. Soldiers, presidents, even my pops used one.
Starred in new History Channel spin-offs like United Stuff of America, and joined Pawnography, a trivia game show where he competed against contestants for items from his own store. Everything he touched seemed to turn to gold. But then came the blow that would shake his world to its core. In June 2018, Rick lost the man who had been his business partner, his father, and arguably the soul of Pawn Stars. Richard Harrison, the old man, passed away after a battle with Parkinson's disease. He was 77. Rick broke the news on Instagram with a simple, heartbreaking message. "He was my hero, and I was fortunate to get a very cool old man as my dad. I will miss him tremendously." The History Channel released a public statement mourning the loss of one of their most beloved personalities. Fans around the world shared their grief, but for Rick, it wasn't just the loss of a co-star. It was the loss of the man who had built everything beside him, and now, for the first time, Rick was alone at the helm. By 2020, the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop had become more than just a store. It was a tourist destination, a filming location, and the backbone of Rick Harrison's empire. But when the world shut down, so did the crowds. And in Las Vegas, that meant everything changed overnight. The COVID-19 pandemic hit the city hard. Casinos went dark, flights were grounded, and tourists vanished. For a business built on foot traffic and face-to-face deals, it was a death sentence in slow motion. At first, Rick, like many, thought it might blow over quickly. In interviews, he predicted the economy would bounce back in 6 months. But as the days turned into weeks and the lockdowns dragged on, reality set in. The shop's doors were forced to close in March 2020, at least to the public. Behind the scenes, Rick and his team scrambled to keep the business afloat. They ran operations through a small night window, staying open 24/7 to serve locals who were hurting. They lowered interest rates on loans, gave people extra time to reclaim their items, did whatever they could. "We understood," Rick told a local news outlet. "This town has given a lot to me, and I try to give back." But even those efforts weren't enough. According to the Daily Mail, the gold and silver pawn shop, which usually made over $1 million a year, brought in just $37,000 during 2020. That's not a typo, from millions to barely scraping by. And as the financial pressure mounted, Rick's personal life cracked again. Quietly, during the chaos of the pandemic and the national unrest following the George Floyd protests, Rick filed for divorce from his third wife, Deanna. The marriage had slowly unraveled, and the pandemic had only made things worse. In court documents, Rick cited irreconcilable differences. Their preferences, opinions, and lifestyles had grown too far apart to continue. But even in divorce, Rick stayed surprisingly diplomatic. He spoke warmly about Deanna's daughters, calling them his own. And though the breakup was finalized without much media fanfare, it marked yet another loss in a year full of them. The pandemic may have spared Rick's shop, barely, but it left deep scars, financially, emotionally, and legally, because what came next would turn the most private wound of all into a full-blown public scandal. Rick Harrison built his brand on family values. For years, Pawn Stars fans watched him banter with his son, spar with his best friend, and trade wisdom with his father, the old man. The Harrisons were the ultimate TV family, tough, loyal, and unbreakable, until they weren't. In February 2022, the illusion shattered. News broke that Rick's own mother, Joanne Rue Harrison, had filed a civil lawsuit against him. The allegations were explosive. She wasn't just suing him personally, she was also taking legal aim at the gold and silver pawn shop, Harrison Properties, and multiple family-controlled businesses. At the heart of the lawsuit was a 51% ownership stake and a disturbing claim. According to Joanne, she had been married to Richard the Old Man Harrison for nearly 6 decades, but sometime in the early 2000s, after waking from a coma in the hospital, she said, Rick pressured her to sign over her majority ownership of the pawn shop. At the time, she claimed she was still recovering and didn't fully understand what she was signing. She also accused Rick of stopping her regular payments, once $25,000 a month, that had been coming from her late husband's share of the business. Joanne said she hadn't received proper financial records for years and believed over $500,000 in cash and silver had mysteriously vanished from Richard's estate. Then came the final blow. Joanne filed a restraining order to prevent her son from selling or hiding any family assets. She was seeking a court order to freeze Rick's control and force a full financial audit. To longtime fans, the news was devastating. Rick Harrison, the man who symbolized loyalty, tradition, and family business, was now being accused of betrayal by his own mother. But Rick wasn't silent. In a rare public statement, he denied the claims outright. "The allegations are false," he said. "I believe my 81-year-old mother is being influenced by others for their own gain." He also claimed the situation caught him off guard, that he'd tried to contact her many times in recent months with no success. Ironically, one of the companies named in the lawsuit was entirely owned by Joanne herself. Still, the damage was done. Headlines painted Rick as a manipulator who took advantage of his mother's health for control and profit. Supporters were divided. Was Rick protecting the family legacy or hiding behind it? Meanwhile, Joanne's legal team painted a different picture of an elderly woman battling serious health issues, worried she'd be left without enough to cover her care, which reportedly cost as much as $155,000 a month. The courts would eventually decide who was right. But in the court of public opinion, the Harrison family no longer looked unbreakable. By early 2024, Rick Harrison had weathered just about every storm. Broken marriages, public lawsuits, financial collapse, but nothing could prepare him for what happened next. On January 19th, police in Las Vegas received a disturbing call. A man had been found unresponsive in his home. That man was 39-year-old Adam Harrison, Rick's second son. For days, no one had seen or heard from Adam. A concerned acquaintance had noticed his absence on January 17th. When his landlord finally checked in, it was already too late. The Clark County Coroner's Office confirmed the cause of death just days later, a fatal combination of fentanyl and methamphetamine. It was ruled accidental, but that didn't soften the blow. Rick broke the news to the public with a heartbreaking photo on Instagram, an old picture of himself and Adam sitting at a restaurant. The caption read simply, "You'll always be in my heart. I love you, Adam." A broken heart emoji followed. For fans, it was a rare and raw glimpse into a man who normally kept his pain private. Suddenly, the pawnshop king wasn't just a shrewd negotiator or a reality TV star, he was a grieving father. A spokesperson for the Harrison family later confirmed the tragedy, urging the public to respect their privacy. And in a rare moment of unity across political lines, even Donald Trump Jr. reached out, commenting, "I'm so sorry, man." Corey Harrison, Adam's older brother and longtime Pawn Stars cast member, posted a childhood photo of the two of them smiling in a bubble bath. His caption, "I'll always love you, Bubba." Though Adam was never seen on the show, he had once worked behind the scenes at the gold and silver pawn shop before choosing a quieter life as a plumber. According to Corey, Adam wasn't interested in fame. He stayed away from the cameras by choice. But now his death had pulled him into the spotlight in the most tragic way possible. Rick, never one to get overly political, used the moment to speak out about the opioid crisis in America. He called for a stronger national response to the fentanyl epidemic, one that had now claimed his own son. For a man who made a living buying and selling the remnants of other people's lives, Rick had now lost one of the most irreplaceable parts of his own. After everything, the fame, the lawsuits, the divorces, and the unimaginable heartbreak, Rick Harrison is still standing. But he's no longer the same man who smiled behind the pawnshop counter in those early episodes of Pawn Stars. These days, Rick has taken a step back from the daily grind. He no longer works full-time at the gold and silver pawn shop. Instead, he's shifted into a semi-retired role, popping in occasionally, but leaving most of the operations to his son Corey and longtime friend Chumley. Instead, Rick has turned his attention to a new chapter of his reality TV career.
Hey, America. Pawn Stars is on the road.
And we're coming to you.
Pawn Stars Do America, a spin-off series where the team travels across the country, meeting fans, appraising items, and sharing history in small towns and cities far from the Vegas Strip. It's a slower pace, but one that suits a man who's endured more than most. In 2023, Rick was honored with the title of Kentucky Colonel, the highest award given by the governor of Kentucky. The ceremony, partly filmed for the show, felt like a quiet nod to everything Rick had built and everything he had lost. At home, Rick spends more time with his grandchildren and the people he trusts. He still posts glimpses of off-roading adventures, father-daughter days with his stepkids, and moments of reflection. Despite the chaos of recent years, he remains close with Corey, who has stood beside him through every rise and fall. But questions still linger. The lawsuit with his mother remains unresolved in the public eye. Legal filings have gone quiet, but whether the damage to their relationship can ever be repaired remains unclear. Politically, Rick hasn't shied away from the spotlight. He endorsed Donald Trump in 2020, backed congressional candidate Dan Rodimer in Nevada, and even floated the idea of running for Senate in 2024. "A lot of people have talked to me about it," he told reporters. "I'm keeping my options open." To some, it sounded like a publicity stunt. To others, it was the latest twist in a life full of reinvention. Whether as a businessman, a TV personality, or a father trying to hold his family together, Rick Harrison has lived more lives than most. And yet, somehow he keeps pushing forward. But behind the legacy and the public image is still the same boy who spent his childhood stuck in bed, reading about clever hustlers and dreaming of something bigger. Rick Harrison built an empire on other people's stories. Rare artifacts, forgotten heirlooms, pieces of history exchanged for cash across the glass counter. But the most valuable story he ever held was his own. It's easy to look at Pawn Stars and see only success, a multi-million-dollar business, global fame, a best-selling book, and years of top-rated television. But behind the reality TV smile is a man who's endured a lifetime of loss. The death of a sibling, a father, and most recently, a son. He's faced bitter divorces, public lawsuits, financial collapse, and a media storm that nearly tore his legacy apart. And yet, through it all, Rick never stopped working, never stopped showing up, never stopped trying to keep the family and the business from crumbling. He once said, "The most interesting things in the world come with a story." But maybe the most unexpected twist is this. Rick Harrison, the tough-talking pawnbroker who became a household name, was living the most painful and fascinating story of them all, from epileptic seizures to global fame. From late-night repossession gigs to courtroom battles with his own mother. From the joy of fatherhood to the heartbreak of burying a son. Rick Harrison may be known for putting a price on history, but his own past is priceless. Drop a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more forgotten Hollywood tales.